This year, it's been chaos. So far, I've mastered 861 projects. At the same time, the first 6 months, I was building a new studio from the ground up. And after living through that, I realized something. 90% of what you stress about in your studio doesn't actually move the needle. Between the EPs, singles, albums, and this whole rebuild, I've seen exactly what tools survived and what was just an expensive distraction. So in this video, I'm breaking down the gear and tools I kept, the new additions that genuinely improve my workflow, the plugin additions which I'm regularly using in 2025, and the big one everybody keeps asking me, am I still mastering with analog gear? And does mastering with analog gear even make sense anymore? Or would I buy any analog if I was just starting out now? And am I going to get any more analog gear? So if you've ever felt stuck choosing what to upgrade, debating a big studio purchase, or wondering what's actually worth obsessing over, this video will definitely help you. Quick heads up, it's Black Friday week, so all my masterclasses are 50% off. If you're doing everything right but still not getting results and you want to level up your mastering, fix the low end in your mixes, or grow your studio business, the links are down below. Alright, let's get into it. What I brought over from the old studio. Well, the first thing is when this room was just blank canvas. There was nothing put up here, there was no treatment, nothing. I brought the Neumann KH310As into the room. Now, given I planned the modal distribution of this room based on its dimensions, and I put the 310s in here, and it sounded incredible with no treatment. It wasn't workable because there was lots of decay in the room, but the soundstage was beautiful. Like, I honestly, if this was just a media room, just by the dimensions and having the Neumanns, I'd just put a couch here and a projector and call it a day. Now, why the Neumanns? So there's a long story behind this, and I'm going to try to keep it short. In 2022, I already knew I was building this room. Like, I already had planned that far ahead, so I was planning to get new speakers. So when I was over in LA, caught up with Dave Malakport from Augsburgers, caught up with the team from PMC, listened to a bunch of these speakers in different rooms, really got to know them, was this close to pulling the trigger on them because they're great monitors, both the companies, Augsburgers and PMC, great monitors. But one of my friends said to me, Nick, I know they're great. I know you got the gear lust, but if you're building a new space and you want to connect with that space, it's probably best to keep the speakers you've got until you're in the new space and you've lived in the space for a while, so that way at least you can learn the space, but you don't have to necessarily learn a new set of monitors and a new space at the same time. So I did that. Now there's more to go on with this monitoring we'll talk about later in the video, but that's why I kept the 310s, and they've been working so beautifully in this space. You know, I don't feel like they're lacking in any way. Now, the next thing I brought in this studio was the thing that connects everything, my converter, my interface, and that's the Antelope Orion 32. It's a powerhouse that has been working for me for over a decade. There's one problem with it, and that is the firmware is completely out of date. Won't work on any new OSs or Macs or computers. It's just absolutely unsupported. I will give credit to RME. RME and Metric Halo do such an incredible job at like legacy support on their product. Antelope, not really. That said, it is really good. I'm using Sphere to do all my routing between audio devices. So the firmware not really working is not much of an issue, but that one did come through. The next thing I brought in from the old studio is the 27-inch iMac. It's actually a temporary fixture in this studio because the plan is to have a Mac Studio in the back wall, and I've got a projector box up there, and that's going to project onto a projector screen. This thing is still powerhousing. The DICE project had 266 channels on it, 92 vocal channels, and this is on OS Monterey. It's a pretty old, it's 8 years old now, this iMac, and it handled it like a beast with not capping, knock on wood, did not drop out, did not crash on me. So it's still powerhousing. When this hits end of life, the plan is, a projector and a Mac Studio in the back wall. And that means there's nothing on the floor in front of me. And then, of course, I brought my HV EQ6, the Manley Verimue, and the Barry Porter Net EQ. I brought these because I was still using them in the old space, and we're still going to answer a question about analog gear at the end of this video. Actually, it's a big part of this video where we're going to go over some nuance about analog gear in the mastering realm and the practicalities across all my projects this year, where this has sort of lived. And the final thing I brought in the studio are the headphones too. Now, to be honest, I don't use headphones all that much in the studio. It's typically when I need a really fresh perspective, or I really need to lock into something that typically a client might be hearing, but I'm not hearing on my monitors, and I'm going, well, why aren't I hearing that? I'll jump onto the headphones as a fresh perspective, and sometimes it can reveal really intricate, like very intricate details when you're just locked in with these right next to your ears. These are incredibly accurate, incredibly good headphones, and now we've talked about what I've brought into the studio from the old one. What has been added that's new to the studio? I think that's a much more funner thing to talk about, because I had to make decisions about what tools to bring in to improve my setup. The first thing is the Neumann KH750As in stereo. Now, these were really interesting because I've never set subwoofers up before, and Neumann have their proprietary MA1 calibration software, but I had no clue how good it would be. I've used SonarWorks before, I've used IK Multimedia, their ARC system, and I felt like any other system would be just as much like those as anything else. You get the frequency response, you invert it, it does its thing. The MA1 with the subwoofers was incredible, and I should have detailed this a bit better in the video I did on subwoofers, but what it did was, when it was tuning everything, it would do the sweeps of the speakers, it would do the sweeps of the subs, it would do the sweeps of the right sub into the right speaker, the left sub into the left speaker, the right sub to the left sub, the left sub to the right sub, the right sub to the left speaker, the left sub to the right speaker. It would calibrate every possible combination of time, domain, and frequency between all these 4 units. And the beauty of this, and this is something I've been experiencing more and more as I'm using the system, is that you don't have like 4 speakers firing at you. You have one entire system of sound working together cohesively to get audio across to you. And that's been incredible. On a more technical, tangible, here's some data. This is my room. The blue line is my room before I added the 2 subwoofers. It's plus minus 3.5 dB down to 26 Hertz. That's with SonarWorks correction. And then with the sub and the MA1 calibration, it's plus minus 2.25, I think. Yeah, 2.5 dB down to 15 Hertz. Very consistent. So, as a system for mastering engineers, like I honestly think Neumann MA1 software is absolutely nailing it for their integration, rather than just as monitor translation or speaker translation, but system integration, which I think is really important. The next thing I've added is the Neumann MT48 as a headphone amplifier. That's replacing the Topping DX7 Pro Plus. Now, that isn't to say the Topping isn't a good headphone amplifier. I still reckon it's probably one of the best on the market. But the capabilities of the Neumann MT48 really gives me good extension for future studio upgrades and provisions. So there's more to come with that in the future on future videos, but that is something that's been newly added to the studio. A new addition to this space, which I didn't have in the old one, was speaker stands. And I'm going to give you quite a dense lesson on my speaker stand design, or modus operandus, about how these speaker stands came about. Before I do, I have to let you know, I'm in Australia, so buying speaker stands that are made anywhere else in the world is expensive because of shipping, import taxes, and duties. The speaker stands I wanted were well over $4,000, and I wasn't going to choke that just to put my speakers on something. So I started researching and going down a rabbit hole, and here's a diary entry I sent out to my newsletter, because my newsletter gets important drip like this, really good data, and you should subscribe to the newsletter down below. Take a look at this. I'm building a speaker stand. Originally, I was going to use steel, but I switched it up and went with MDF. But now, after doing some more research, I'm thinking steel might be the way to go. That's why I'm planning to build both a steel and MDF stands to compare results. caveat, I never finished building the MDF ones. I got halfway through building both the columns and then realized the steel ones were way more superior. And we'll go into a little bit about that. Now, there are 3 key factors when designing a speaker stand: density, weight, and elasticity. Density is important because denser materials are less resonant at lower frequencies and provide more dampening. Weight is crucial because of Newton's third law of motion. Each action has an equal and opposite reaction. The heavier the stand, the less it will move, and we can achieve this by adding sand to structural columns. This also helps to dampen any resonances by applying outward force in opposition to the material's shear forces and vibrations. Density and weight data of materials. MDF is 1 ton per cubic meter, plywood is 600 kilograms per cubic meter, pine is 450 kilograms per cubic meter, and steel is 8 ton per cubic meter. Elasticity is another important factor. Search modulus of elasticity because that will give you a little bit more information about why this property is important. And this is where things get interesting. Elasticity is how a material resists a distorting influence before returning to its original shape when that force is removed. The shear stiffness is measured by finding the shear modulus, which measures how rigid the body of the material is in relation to the ratio of shear strength to shear strain. And let me tell you, the data points I gathered of the GPa, which is a measurement of pascals or gigapascals, of various materials were mind-blowing. MDF is 2.5 GPa, plywood 1.3, pine 1.2, and steel 70. Now, this is important because the elasticity is something I never really considered because I only thought of density and weight. But you can have dense materials that are still elastic in their nature, which means they can create resonant structures or membranes, so to speak, within a space. Hence why I wanted to go for something that would not distort or have any distorting influence resisting a force. So steel is what I chose. So these speaker stands, let's get down to the design. I saw a design I liked. I mapped it out on pen and paper. It is 4 mil. It's 4 mil thick Australian steel. All the steel in all up, I think, costs like $350 or so. All these steels, all the columns are filled with sand and self-leveling cement. They are ridiculously heavy. So they are about 60, 70 kilos each stand. So they're ridiculously heavy. In addition to being ridiculously heavy, they're steel. So they're exceptionally rigid. They're exceptionally dense. They're not reverberant at all because we've filled out the columns. So there's outward force from the inside out. So they're not resonating. And they're beautiful. They work so well. They're incredible speaker stands. Who is it? Colt Caparoon has a video on speaker stands with sound anchors over in America compared to some other speaker stands, and he's got some really interesting results he finds for them. So I'd recommend going there, looking at that, doing some research into modulus of elasticity around material and acoustic design, and then coming to the table to have a discussion because I really like geeking out it. The next thing I got was the Stream Deck, and that is basically as a monitor controller. I did bring the central station in from the old studio, but it was clunky as hell. I've got a whole video on how I set up this Stream Deck, but I would never go back. This is such an awesome bit of kit. This pairs with Sphere by Ginger Audio to actually make it a full monitoring system, like monitoring controlling system, and it's just beautiful. To get into the plugin additions, what things have I introduced into my mastering workflow this year that is new and consistent across many sessions? So the first one is Crafter. Standard clip is still my main ride, but Crafter comes up at least each day in the studio. It's really powerhousing home for me when it comes to mastering applications where there's transient information and where I don't want to add too much color, but I just want to bring a bit of body to things. This has been incredible. Incredible tool in the mastering domain. The next one is IRC5 algorithm on the Maximizer. Ozone 12 came out this year. The IRC5 algorithm, I believe, is goated. I'm still using Pro L2s all round, and I'm still using other modes in Ozone, but the IRC5 is really a mainstay. Like I'd say about 7 to 8 out of 10 sessions, you're going to find this being worked and used. Another one is bass control. At least each day, I'm pulling this up on 1 or 2 sessions. It is such a good low-end sculptor for just managing the sustain portion, the transient portion, having ability to parallel compress the sustain portion, having ability to peak reduce the peak portion. This is, again, something that's magical. And finally, we've got Schwab Digital's Hi-Fal. Now, I've got a video I got to put together for this because one of the records I worked on using this, which I thought was a great case study, has finally been released into the world, so I can actually do a video on this. This is an acceleration limiter for high frequency content. I'm not going to do it justice explaining all the intricacies of this right now, but I really have to commend Ryan Schwab, who's the owner of this company and a fellow mastering engineer, for how he's really stood up to presenting his product and stress testing it and explaining all of his thought process behind it on his channel. So I'm not trying to say this to sell the products, quote unquote, but I do take my hat off to any developer or creator that leads with the value of their product rather than the sales pitch itself. And Ryan did that when he released this. He made some incredible videos for the community about how to get the most out of it. And it's really detailed and really informative in a good, positive, educational way that I do implore you, or do like sort of encourage you to go check that out before you make your mind up about the Hi-Fal. I will be doing my own video on it because there's some exciting things and nuances to the way I'm using it, but that's for another day, because we're here for this question that you really want answered. Am I still mastering with analog gear? So to answer this, what did I do? Now, any project I master with analog gear, I put together recall notes and send them off in the email when I deliver the masters. So I've got the recall notes alongside the masters I've delivered. So I went in my email, checked how many of the 861 projects did I send off with recall notes. Any guesses? 70 projects for this year. That's 1 in every 12 projects was mastered using analog gear. Now, why is that? I'm going to give some anecdotes because I just don't know why. Sometimes I lean on it and it does something magical, but I think anecdotes are really important. Today, actually, funnily enough, today I was mastering an album. I'll finish the album tomorrow. I was doing this sort of like jazz fusion-y album, and the mixes were okay, let's say. They were okay. It was great music. It was a great production. The mixes in the low end, they were really bumped, and the top end needed some more clarity, and I didn't want to look at the screen, to be honest. I'm like, I don't want to get into the weeds of this because I can hear if there's a deficiency, but I just want to balance this with feel. So what did I do? Screen was in black mode, and I was just dialing in on the analog chain and I got the first 3 or 4 tracks today, just where I feel is good. Okay. So that's number 1. Sometimes it's just good to work on analog gear. Feels good. Number 2 is 2 weeks ago, I had Tim Maxwell in for this really cool record for this artist called Xantry. And when that record's out, you're going to love it. Anyway, Tim's here. He gives me this Olivia Rodrigo reference, and it's really gritty and heavy in the choruses. I can't remember the name of the track, but I was listening to it, and it was like gritty and heavy in the choruses and light and open in the verses. I don't want to do this in digital world. I want to feel the pump of the Verimum. I want to just get the grit together, and not be not too concerned about what's going on screen. I just want to feel it in. And it worked amazingly. Like it did magic. It did what it was meant to do. So 1 in every 12 tracks, I'm mastering. And of course, that begs the question, does analog mastering even make sense in 2025, in 2026, as we move on into the future? If I'm answering honestly, no. Like, it just doesn't. The pace of projects is so fast. especially from labels and management, and when revisions are needed, and there's so many assets to deliver between your mix, your TV mix, your instrumental, your a cappella, any stems, and then you have little revisions of those, or a clean and a radio. I'll be honest, mastering with analog gear doesn't make sense, but we still do it. It doesn't matter whether it makes sense or not. To like if there's a practical sense to it, because it's very impractical in this day and age with the speed at which you need to work at. But it brings, how do I put it? I'm happy to make the sacrifice on my end, in terms of sacrificing my time for a project to sound exactly how my ears and exactly how I believe my clients need it to sound. And that's why I keep the analog gear here. That is only for 1 in every 12 projects this is needed, statistically speaking. So for the times I'm not using the analog gear, I've got super fast recall because everything's digital. So it sort of balances itself out in the time domain. So like when like today's album and the one I'm finishing up tomorrow, all my recalls are going to be analog. It's going to be a pain in the ass if the mixes get updated or I get notes, but whatever. I do that because it's how I'm getting it sounding as good as it sounds. But then I have another project. This morning I woke up, I needed to update a file in a mix, in a master, and it was all digital master. So I just popped it in, made sure that the levels were good, and off to the races. Now I want to answer another question, is would I get analog if I was still starting out? No, I would not. I would not, as much as I'd love it. If I was starting from scratch, there's probably $14,000 of analog gear there. As far as mastering studios go, is not an exceptional amount of money. Not by any stretch of the imagination is that an exceptional amount of money spent on analog gear. But if I was starting out today and I needed to kit my studio together, there's so much other stuff I would get before spending the money on analog gear, because I can create a bigger impact across more records which touch my desk using other tools and having a breadth of tools rather than just funneling all my money into 2 or 3 pieces of select analog gear. Another really interesting question is, well, you're not starting out anymore. You've been working a decade and you've got the resources and the work to invest in more analog gear. Are you getting any more? Now, I don't think so. I honestly don't think I'm getting any more analog gear. And the main reason is I've got a really nice symbiotic workflow with this little bit of kit here and everything I've got on my computer systems, that I don't feel like I'm missing out on anything yet. There's not been a piece of analog gear that's been built or made that's come across that has been such a big gap that I'm not going to get it in the box. Now, don't get me wrong, if somebody sent me out a Fairchild and like, Nick, here, have it for free, I'd be like, oh, yes, a Fairchild. Damn right I'm going to get that on. But that's just not reality. And the reality I live in, working on records, I don't genuinely see myself buying more analog gear. So that's been my journey. That's my journey so far this year, getting to the end, working on records, picking out things for the studio, and yeah, just living the dream. And yeah, I really hope this helped you. I'm always trying my best to give out to the community, and I do encourage you to check out the newsletter down below, because that's where I really give, free, incredible advice. And by incredible, I mean the fact that on a Monday morning for 1.5 hours, I will sit down writing these emails and trying to compartmentalize a concept or something I'm going through or something I'm learning for the benefit of the general community, or sometimes just even questions people are asking me. But I really try to put that effort in once a week. And with that, I hope you enjoyed this. Until next time, take care.